Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me at the back? Yes. Cool. So I've been asked to start while people are getting in. I'm hoping more people, maybe it's not as crowded last time, thankfully. Um, Hi, everyone. My name's Avinash Kumar. I'm representing my studio, Antariksha Studio, today, and glad to be here. Thanks for coming out here and watching my talk. The subject of the talk will be on our ongoing game. It's actually a game demo right now called Antara that also received an Epic Mega Grant in 2021. And so what I'm going to show you is ongoing work. And just a little bit about ourselves and a little background before we dive in, because we don't have so much time and I have a lot to share. I'll be going through really fast through this, but happy to meet anyone after this for sure and get into details. So we're a studio that makes transmedia storytelling work, and we work across video games, performances, and arts. And the work you're going to see today is, of course, supported by Epic Mega Grants, but also the British Council and the new incubator in New York. So getting right to it, the question I'm trying to like have the group think about and not necessarily present from me to you is this idea of independent AAA. I'm not going to get too much into it because I also want you to think about it as a group. And also, if some of you haven't watched, there's a really great talk on GDC from 2015 from the guys at Ninja Theory and speaking about Hellblade being an independent AAA experiment. And in a nutshell, their idea there was to bridge this gap between indie and AAA. Of course, Hellblade was coming from the AAA side towards indie when they make Hellblade. I'm coming from the side of making no games before and trying to say that I want to make a AAA game. And I'm going to show you examples from our ongoing video game Antara, like I said. A little bit background to our story. We're actually in our 10th year of development, which sounds crazy. But our story is quite interesting. We started in 2010 as a Bharatanatyam performance by the dancer Jayalakshmi Ishwar on the left. I used to do visuals back in the day, even now with music and stuff, and somehow doing that work got me into this idea of making this project, which is hidden behind me right now. Maybe you can't see it. But from 2012 to 2016, we built our first manifestation of this project on Unity. We built a 1-hour game which we didn't have the team to optimize and put into the market. So it went to many festivals and whatever around the world for many things, but we never could put it in the market. Then my programmer got burnt out. I got burnt out. I had no money. Took a break. We got back to the project in 2018 through Red Bull Music to make a new show with dancers, but bringing back the game engine into the show. And this is where we started working with Unreal and started developing visuals for the show. And then in 2019, I applied for the Epic Mega Grants. And that kind of like brought us to where we are. Over the years, we've built a whole lot of things. I think transmedia is an important aspect of what we're trying to share today, with video games being, and I'm trying to show you through this project how video games can be at the center of a transmedia IP. So moving on more, just in the interest of time, into the subject of today, which is about our project. I'm going to give you just 4-5 slides, just a brief background, because obviously you guys don't know what we're doing. So Antara is essentially a 3D game, obviously. It's a kind of a rhythmic adventure through colonial India. It's set in the late 1800s, but in a fantasy past, essentially. And we're trying to explore the genre of retro sci-fi through this project. And the idea in Antara is that you visit different spaces in this kind of fantasy, mythical India. And in these spaces, you try to outwit the colonizers and you try to unlock these mythological flying machines. So a big topic of this game and the project is around flight and kind of outer space, flights on this planet, but essentially around the idea of flight and machines. And I'm just going to give you a brief description of the 3 pillars of the project. One is obviously the topic of India. We are trying to celebrate Indian culture and mythology through this project. We feel there's a huge gap in India between the amount of culture we have and also subcultures we have and the amount of video games being made. In this room, I can see there are at least people from all parts of India, most probably, and all parts of India can make hundreds of games. So part of what we're trying to do is just to lay that seed for ourselves and our peers to think about culture as a starting point for gaming. The second pillar of the game is that we're also trying to think through the future of certain formats of games, like first-person shooters, action-adventure games, and so on and so forth, and trying to see what could be a non-violent way of expressing a 3D adventure. which is not a space that's been explored too much, but of course in the recent years there's been a lot more growth around the world on that. So it's essentially a stealth adventure that we're looking at. On the screen you can see a few visuals about the main characters and the British soldiers trying to hide from each other and so on and so forth. And the third part is that as I showed you in the first slide, since one of the origins of this project is through the dance of Bharatanatyam and in general classical dance and music, therefore it became important that dance action and in some sense music action, like you might see in games like Bound or even Guitar Hero, for example, simple, fun ways to learn about music, to play music, or to perform dance becomes one of the pillars that we're trying to explore, which is anyway a complicated mechanic, but we're still trying. And then what I prepared right now is a bunch of development highlights from the project itself. I've structured it according to the overall pipeline for game creation, because I can see that a lot of people here are also coming from a technical side of game creation, and so it might be useful for you to see the whole pipeline, how we're trying. I also wanted to, sorry, it's really bright in this room. I just also wanted to point out that in many ways, we're trying to make an independent AAA game, but it is also an experiment. And therefore, what I've chosen to share with you, all of you today, is not the glamorous end results of the beautiful renders. It's all the dirty process work that doesn't look so great at times, has a lot of mistakes, but most probably is much more valuable to share in this setting. And I'm hoping that some of you will take back something from this sharing. Okay, so starting with just character design. Of course, when we started this project, just to give you a sense of our team, we have a very small team, only 3 full-time people right now through the Epic Mega Grants and through the pandemic, and about 8 or 9 part-time people working from all parts of India and a couple abroad. And also people coming from the AAA industry. So we started this project in a sense with the more traditional sculpting pipeline, and bang in the middle of the pandemic and when we were working came MetaHumans, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But this is us exploring the character of the boy. Of course, not going to spend too much time. I'm sure all of you have seen this kind of work before. But just wanted to point out different kinds of character choices we've been making. For example, this is a poet, Avayar. Some people from South India might be familiar with the character of the Avayar. And trying to explore again how you can take inspiration from films. That's my grandmother. That's the mythical kind of, and trying to combine all of that together into a sculpting pipeline. And then, of course, MetaHumans happened, which is obviously, maybe a lot of you would be already familiar. But we've been working with MetaHumans since it got dropped in kind of beta version. And we spent a lot of our early time in this project trying to crack the MetaHuman pipeline before the recent more stable and more sort of sophisticated versions got out. And this is some of our early work, which was interesting, where we're trying to essentially create custom faces which are much more like the people in this room, like me and you and everybody else, Indian features, which are very different from the Indian that you get in MetaHumans. It looks like an Indian, but when you get into a more professional AAA kind of pipeline and you want likeness and you want smaller things like the bend of the nostril at the back, Indians have it a certain way, and different types of Indians, different parts of India and people come from also have that in a different way, different earlobes. I'm just trying to express the fact that ends up giving the idea of likeness beyond, the psychology of character recognition is actually built on those smaller things. So this is some work. We also tried a stylized pipeline. You can see the kind of the faceting on the nose, which is quite interesting. And then we also moved into the main character, where we moved from that one, which was a ref, like a benchmark, a pre-rendered option, and trying to see how we could take it into MetaHumans. This was really interesting. It's in-game, in-engine, I mean. And then also, this is some of the early work that we did with the character and some of the costume that I'll show you. Again, super exciting. I mean, honestly, when I started this project, it was hard. It's hard to believe that a small team like ours with, sparse funding can even make things like this today. It would be practically impossible, even as early as maybe 2 or 3 years back. I would not have thought about making work like this. I just want to play a small video. Oh, sorry. I think is it playing? Yes. Which just gives you some sense of, so this is the character of Ramanujan, who's the boy in the story. This is the custom mesh kind of output from recent times. We haven't touched the hair because I don't know who's tried hair here, but hair is a real problem for small developers like us right now. That's the character of the mother. Again, this is inside the MetaHuman browser, but with using the custom mesh option, which if you haven't tried, I would recommend highly to try it out. It's just amazing, basically, to even be able to have options like this. And also, I'll just move on a little bit to ahead in the interest of time over here. Yeah, and then also trying to take that, and this is the Bharatanatyam practice costume we've been working on as a third-person controller, bringing all that back, both the characters, into the engine, running super smooth. Of course, there are small, you can be picky and talk about elbows and the rig, and there's still complications. There are still technical sort of challenges in implementing metahumans across a real-time game. But I think we're definitely getting there and trying to move with the technology. This is really cool in the sense that all the cloth simulation here is done on Houdini and then brought back into Unreal. Again, I don't know if there are any Houdini artists here, but that's a huge skill for the future. If some people are interested in the connection between Unreal and Houdini, I would highly recommend investing your time into that, because that's going to sort out a lot of problems, especially for people who belong to small teams and want to do much more with a small team. Yeah, I'm just going to skip through some of this just slowly, just so that and keep talking about it. Again, India obviously offers a huge amount of different character designs, so to say the least. And this is a Yali. Again, people from South India will be familiar with. And this is the costume that we're working on right now. It's a pretty recent update from last month. And we're trying to also push the character design a little bit more into a science fiction space in a more obvious way. We're also learning as we do this project and understanding more about the nuances of character design. And this, again, is complicated. We actually have to re-rig this now, redesign it, because it's just too much happening. Technically, it's not working out in-game. So we have to go back and do this. And I think one of the big learnings with the character work for me has just been in Unreal is that you have to just keep going in and out and make that a part of the process, as opposed to the traditional pipeline of finishing your work, then getting it into the engine, and then tweaking some stuff. I would feel like right now where we are, a much more dynamic process of going back in and out of the engine, back to Maya or ZBrush, back into the engine, and having a kind of flow that lets you do both and update kind of both sides would be great. Also working on inspiration from Indian temple sculpture. So this is some inspiration from the Chola period. These will obviously be textured in bronze and so on. And we're trying to make them as moving automaton robot kind of beings. This is just from 2 days back. This is an Indian soldier from the British era. And I just wanted to put this out here. Obviously, it's nothing special beyond metahumans being amazing. But just wanted to express that we built the soldier in 15 minutes. We built an Indian soldier in 15 minutes. I'll just play this video as well. So the guy's not textured. Again, very rough and ready. But we made the Indian soldier in 15-20 minutes. Made the British, not the garments, the body. Got it into an engine later that day. And we were kind of good to go. And I think that kind of speed and access to that kind of quality, again, is just fantastic, and highly recommend trying this out. Moving on to props, one of the points I wanted to make was just in general, just around, I know a lot of people here make games. I'm not a game maker before this project. I'm a designer and researcher. And that world of research and design taught me that when you're trying to make something, you always try to go out to the real thing, visit the places, meet the people, eat that food, and that's where real good design comes from. So a lot of our work and time has been invested in field research in South India. This is some of it in the Dakshin Chitra Museum in Chennai, and then some of the interpretations of that work. I'm just going to play a video while we're talking about it, which shows you some of the quality of the props that we're trying to work on, which is also the challenge with AAA, right? I mean, at the end of the day, AAA means whatever you want it to mean, but it does mean something. So to go towards that something means to boost your skill, to really try hard to achieve a certain quality. I don't think we're still there. I think we have a long way to go, but it's amazing to just be on that journey. And I think as Indians in this room, or anybody for that matter, when you look at the craft traditions of whichever country or space you're from, especially South Asia, the craft tradition is so high, right? You have this kind of amazing benchmark of quadruple A, I would say, has already been set up in this country, in every nook and cranny, in any city, any town. So making AAA is not looking abroad to see who's the coolest game maker. It's to actually walk around your neighborhood. You'll find a quadruple A thing and think of that as your benchmark. And then try to see how you can get closer to that. These are objects you are seeing from a museum. It's not photogrammetry. It's ground-up sculpting from photo references. But the idea is to go towards that look of a photogrammetried object, which means there's aging, there's real life has worked some magic on that object, basically. And yeah, this is the collection of objects that we're working on with several museums now. This is with Dakshin Chitra. Sorry, my contrast between pages is maybe strobing a bit. This is an example of a modular kit that we're building, inspired by the Hoysala temples in Karnataka. where a plethora of dancers and musicians are captured in stone. And one of the things we're trying to do is to, again, I'll just show you what's happened to that. Right. Sorry, yeah. So this is the asset that we're building. Again, so it's totally modular. It's not perfect, I would say right now. We did it in a bit of a hurry. But it shows you also well some of the possibilities of working in this manner. And also, I don't have the, yeah, I have a version from the engine on the next slide. Also, Unreal is amazing for, I feel at least, given that I'm not a technical 3D person. For me, I try to do everything in Unreal, including modeling work now, or like editing 3D, compositions, all of that stuff can just be done in engine, which for me as a non-technical artist is actually quite fascinating. And this is kind of what it looks like in the engine. We're just trying to like have fun with this. That's nothing serious. But again, it is amazing to just have all of this in here. The other part of the props that I wanted to share with you along this AAA direction is how do you get, in a project like ours, which is looking at heritage and stuff, how do you, can we use photogrammetry, right? And obviously some of you are familiar, somebody brought up the question of reality capture in the last talk. And we've been working a lot with museums because one of the things we want to do is that this is some of the examples of the photogrammetry. Again, it's not perfect, but the cool thing here is that it's a totally automated process in this one. We work through certain node systems in reality capture and in Houdini to just essentially take our photo set and give us this. And like each one of these took about 13 minutes to make. So from that point of view, the perfection is not there, but including the cleanup. So there's no cleanup on these. It's about 13 to 14 minutes an object using a certain pipeline that we've been working on. Super exciting. I mean, there are issues with nanite and poly count and, like texture, sizes, blah, blah, blah. But it's still amazing. I mean, guys, you couldn't do this 3-4 years back. Somebody like me could not do this 3-4 years back. So just from that point of view, just like amazing. I wanted to play a small video just talking over the photogrammetry. Come on. Oh, I don't know why it's not. Okay, some issue with my computer. But yeah, I'm just going to browse through it a little bit while chatting. So this is all stuff that we did all over South India in places like Trichy, Madurai, Karaikudi, etc., etc. We did temples, we did temple architecture, we did everyday spaces, we did, everyday things. I mean, we did, like just a whole bunch of things, sculptures, etc., etc. These are not necessarily for use in the game because I think one of the things that we're trying to take care of is also to say that, there are things that are public that belong to the communities that we live in. Even if, yes, it's easy to do photogrammetry and come back with amazing 3D models like this, but let's create a digital museum out of these and let those not go into the game, basically. That's what we're trying to do. But I wanted to show you this again. All of these are from this automated pipeline. And it gives you a kind of a good sense of the possibilities for level design, for prop creation. And again, what you can do with a small team today. Also, you need to head out and see the country for this. Moving on to some aspects of level design. Again, level design is complicated. I am the de facto level designer in the project, which is complicated in some sense. But just to give you a sense of what we've been doing, obviously like very low-res kind of like mock-up models, which are modular, all these modular shops, modular Chettinad mansion, and then using that to create some first looks of what the place might be like. And then, also in Unreal 5 now, trying to go through other kind of modeling tools. I don't know if you guys have checked out the kind of, what is it called? The geometry script based like modeling tools. If you haven't, you should, because it's just amazing. And especially some of you in the programmers in the room, you can really do some magic with that inside Unreal, which I think is a highly underutilized tool for level design. And some of this has been made using, we basically took the tools from the Lyra engine, the Lyra multiplayer project, and we imported those tools into our project, and then we've been working on that. And then in terms of this more micro spaces, again, trying to bring in all the stuff I showed you back into these kind of we're trying to make a marketplace. When we started this project, I'm sure everyone here has played Uncharted Lost Legacy, right? There's an opening market scene, right? So when we started this project, a playful challenge was, if Indians made that market in Uncharted, then what would it look like? So this market started off as a challenge, bad challenge to take on, because it's complicated. Also dealing with nanite, I mean, when you actually have to deal with it when you start making a shop like this, which is, where you want that density of India to show. And there is a real challenge in trying to do Indian spaces, right? I mean, we have 1 billion+ people We have just a lot of object culture in some sense. Everything's crammed. And Nanite is the perfect tool for representing India, I think. But I think it needs a couple of more years for us to like figure out the right way to do this. And again, some of the scenes, again, just to give you a sense of what it's looking like. I mean, I think level design is just, I mean, I've seen a lot of the older workflows, though I'm not such a like AAA experienced person myself, where a lot of the level design might happen in other platforms like Maya, and there'll be integrations, and then you basically are just using Unreal for like, getting everything together, basically. But the way we've been working is that we're trying to bring everybody in our team into the engine. So even if you're not if you're a 3D artist, you can work. You work in the engine. You're a sound designer. You work in the engine. And it's hard. It is very hard to do that. But I've realized in the last 6 months of struggling through this whole thing that unless my whole team's working in the engine, I actually won't be able to be successful as a team. And so we're trying to flip that idea of saying that, what if I get a AAA 3D sculptor to work with the in Unreal Engine 3D tools, right? There's a certain combination there, and if you guys, some of you see the talks on some of these hidden aspects of Unreal, which you maybe are not get talked about so much, there's a wealth of stuff that you can do to create as a small team, especially for inexperienced people. I think it's a great starting point. I just want to show you a little bit of this marketplace while we're chatting. Again, one key topic for our project is this idea of museums, and we are also looking at, I mean, while making this project, it occurred to me that actually a video game is also like a museum. And it's an interesting metaphor to take rather than taking this AAA game kind of direction all the time to say, hey, keep all that aside. What is a level, right? And it's essentially a curation of different objects, of different experiences and different sensorial ideas into this one setting that you as a designer or as a design team are bringing in this whole world of your choice into this new space and then showcasing it to people and creating a forum for entertainment, education, inspiration. And so we're actually looking at games as museums, and I think that's given a very different perspective just on the level design, or even as video games as a festival, like a festival like this. For me, a video game making a level design is more like a place like this, where you brought all these strangers together with strange objects, and you're trying to make sense out of it. And I think these kind of metaphors are quite useful to think about the AAA challenge in a different way, because I'm not from the industry in some sense. I mean, I am from the industry because I'm making games, but I'm coming from the outside. And one of my big observations about the Indian game industry has been that people are too caught up with this idea of making a AAA game or making a game that looks a certain way, acts a certain way. And that creates so much pressure that often you get paralyzed by the very idea of trying to make something like that. And so instead, we try to focus on totally different things like museum, festival. It's not a game, it's something else. And that helps ease up the pressure and ease up some of the expectations internally as well. What happened? This is one of the sandbox that we've been working on. The character of Ramanujan, sorry, the cloth sim is his Veshti's lungi is tearing. But basically a lot of mistakes. It's not a complete scene, but just to give you a better sense of how some of these things that I've been sharing with you can come together. And this is at like, I don't know, 30% of what I wanted, what it will be. So, but again, as someone who's never made games like this before, at 30%, I'm super excited. Like, I'm happy with that 30% already. Just as an individual who's just, the enjoyment that you get by trying to create work like this is something to really like, think about as a serious kind of a thing that inspires you to do more. I want to talk a little bit about animation and performance capture. As I shared with you, 5 minutes. Okay, wow, I'm going to go through this fast. Dance is a big part of the project, so we've been doing, mocap sessions remotely in the pandemic. We've been also exploring Houdini again for small teams to deal with mocap, because mocap is obviously not as simple as putting on a suit and getting your mocap data, right? Nothing in Unreal is, or nothing in general is in games. And so Houdini's been quite useful to do things like finger correction in an automated manner, which for a small team is virtually impossible, basically, or too expensive. This is some of the early work. Sorry for the technical artists in here, the rig is off. This is the early version of MetaHumans, so shoulders and stuff are looking off. But it gives you a sense of some of the facial, it's hidden here again, and some of the kind of mocap work that we've been trying to do. This slide shows you a bit of the early tests in the same sandbox of the real-time facial animation. This one here is interesting, if you guys can see, which is basically my mom on Zoom in real time, sending data from Zoom to Faceware Studio to Unreal in one phone call. And again, it's just magic. It has a lot of issues still. It's complicated, but it's just amazing to be able to like do something like this. Just moving on to cloth sim. Again, clothing is a big part of Indian culture. You have dance costumes, sarees, lungis, veshtis, all kinds of things, different ways of tying veshtis and lungis, and so on and so forth. And every state in India has its own, many, many ways of doing it. But we've been trying to explore all of this and also like trying to do some work where we're trying to bring back old dresses from, let's say, Tanjore Balar Saraswati, who's no more with us, but trying to bring back her costumes. I will say that while this is super exciting, looks great, this is a Bharatanatyam costume, it's very complicated to get right. For certain kinds of costumes, if you have like skirts, like Western dresses, at times it's easier. But when you start doing free-form garment thing or pleats and stuff, it's very complicated. But it's still an essential thing. You can't not make clothes for people. But of course, you can redesign them in a way that they might not need so much cloth sim. But in general, the pipeline we're exploring here is a combination of sort of bone-based animations inside the garments, real-time cloth simulation, as well as like in some sense like rigging, basically, like fabric rigging inside Houdini. And there's a combination of these three things that's going to finally give us the answer. Hair, again, I won't get into it right now. Just in terms of Unreal game design, I just want to highlight a little bit of the fact that as a group, as a small group, we're working and trying to use the engine for game design. And when I say that, we're trying to develop ideas inside the engine. So these are some prototypes of a game puzzle that happened in engine. These are prototypes of a musical puzzle. And so without trying to get into a separate system, we're trying to build and explore and experiment with the game logic and the game design, so to speak, by using the tools of the engine. I'll just skip this one. Just a quick note on material design. Again, there's some unbelievable features in Unreal right now for material design. Again, I don't think too many people explore that just because it's complicated and kind of layered in some sense. But because we have a dedicated material designer, thankfully, we are able to explore this. Just from last week, we just built a modular kit for a Chettinad mansion. That's some of the renders. These are some of the close-ups of the materials. And these are some of the actual materials themselves. Again, I'd just like to point out that all of these are completely procedural, like completely procedural. So all the patterns that you see are procedural and therefore can be adjusted and modified right now once we've gotten here. It's a laborious process. Again, same with the garments. All of the textures here are materials are procedural, built on Substance Designer with the dedicated material artists we have. Sound design in engine, again, we haven't been exploring meta sounds so much. Because we were preparing the ground for meta sounds, and so we've been investing a lot of time in like recording. We did about 40 artists, temple musicians, traditional artists, electronic musicians, singers, and so on. And now we're trying to like this just a video from there, which we don't need to get into right now. But basically, yeah, we did all of this, and then we're trying to now start off work in meta sounds, trying to take these Indian kind of ideas and trying to combine that with the power of meta sounds, which is essentially procedural. I mean, not completely, but a huge element of it is procedural music, sound design, and ambient kind of environments, and all of that stuff can be done. These are musical instruments that we've designed. It's all our work in 3D that we're trying to make an online exhibition with. And finally, my last 3 slides, almost done. Just a few snaps of like what's happening recently with us, which is literally like 2-3 weeks back. We finally figured out one half crappy version of the cloth sim, which was already complicated, but now we have to redesign the entire garment from scratch because of what we have learned while trying to do this, which is kind of, tough. And then we have also been working on other things. This is a little spaceship that the main character comes on. I just wanted to also point out that I made this, the ship completely in engine with some of our objects and some kit bash things, but it was assembled completely from scratch in the engine, and we'll stick with this model for the demo right now. So again, just to illustrate my point earlier, also this gives you some sense of some of the, this is the marketplace. I just did some quick renders before I came. This is not final, but it gives you a sense of the quality that you can get. This is obviously on, this is not even on sequencer. This is just the camera moving slowly, and I'm just recording it, which is again interesting because it is real-time rendering in that sense. We haven't pushed it through anything else. And just to, the cinematic quality is something that everyone knows Unreal. Everyone knows in general. I've seen everything looks good on Unreal kind of a thing. But everything that goes before you get to that point, there's a lot in there. And what we are excited about is that we've spent the last year and a half making things, going through all of this, and finally we're coming to a point where we can dump it all and then explore things like VFX and lighting, which again is a huge science in itself, and a big kind of a part of that in Unreal. It is about like, you can see we're getting some decent quality, even though it's a bad screen grab. And then finally, just the last two slides. This is just one view of one of the levels that we're working on right now, which is like this abandoned courtyard with these automaton kind of things inside it. And then there's, I'll just show you that Chettinad courtyard. So this is one of the scenes. Again, there's a lot of block mesh going on, as you can see. We've been using this tool called Blockout plugins, which is super useful in case someone wants a good tool for doing blockouts with. Again, it's just easy to just make, again, this was done without concept art, just playing around in the engine, seeing the modular kit, coming up with ideas. Same for this whole island that we're building. Everything was done. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but we didn't use any concept art. We should be using concept art. We just didn't have a concept artist, and we couldn't find one. And we just said, hey, let's just do it in engine. So it's concept art in engine, level design in engine, everything in engine. And then the last slide is just the marketplace again, just so you can see a little bit more of the things coming together. We've put a lot of emphasis on everyday things. I think these are the kind of things that you don't see in games. And going back to my example of Uncharted Lost Legacy, one of the things I got really, which I didn't like about the market, is that the market doesn't have any significance, right? And we all have been to Indian markets, and there are secrets and magic when you go to Old Delhi or any place. The magic is in the market. It's not just a place to go through to a great adventure. The adventure is in the market. And so part of what we've been trying to do is to highlight, those dolls over there. You can go close to them. They're super detailed, right? And that's also why we're trying to, like, obviously the combination of nanite and lumen and all of this stuff gives us the advantage that we can, explore these very small, minute things which a game like Uncharted would not do in a cultural context like ours, because the game is about something else. Since our game is about this, we can do this. What I shared with you was our project Antara, which is set in the past. We're also working on a project called Elsewhere in India, which is part 2 of Antara. Antara set in the past in 1892. Elsewhere in India set in 2079. That's my t-shirt as well. And they both have women-led characters. They're both Bharatanatyam dancers. All the people here are interested in remixing Indian culture. And we're trying to, in some sense, and that's also built on Unreal. But the outcome of that right now is an extended, XR performance and also a video game. While obviously Antara is the video game, that's a performance. But they're using the same pipeline. And I think I just wanted to share this with you to show that one of the cool things I've figured now at the end of this journey that we are on is that once you crack a certain learning and a pipeline, like they say, then the ability to implement that in a new project. So what we did in Elsewhere in India in a month or two, we could do in a month or two what we took a year to do here, basically. We could make the metahumans, we could make the garments, we could make everything look good, and everything went smoothly. So yeah, my last provocation is just this idea of what does independent AAA mean for India? For India mean for you in this room. For me, what it means is that it's homegrown, it's vibrant, it's playful, and it's audacious. Because otherwise you can't, because we're not a AAA company trying to be independent. We're an independent company that's trying to be AAA. And there's a big difference in that. And I think everybody in this room should aspire not to make AAA. I don't care about the AAA label as such, but we should aspire for quality. We should aspire for making things authentic. And we should definitely aspire for showing that small teams can do large things. I think one of the big problems with the global model for game development today, and the models that I think a lot of people in this room follow, it's like an industry and a factory metaphor for making something that is actually a cultural artifact. And let's move away from that factory model. Let's think of each other as human beings, and let's treat our projects like they deserve to be, which is they are animate, living environments with living people. They might be virtual, they might be meta-human, but they are living people who are based on the real world. And so let's bring that life back into gaming. I think that's what small studios can do. That's my presentation. Thank you so much. Can I ask for questions for a minute? 2 questions? Yeah. Okay, you're up front, so I have to take you. Okay, tell me. Yeah.
Did most of the research through like sculpting and everything, right? Why did you not is the photogrammetry pipeline too complex, or did you research it and wasn't to your needs or something?
Sure. So the question is that why did we go with hand sculpted props and as opposed to photogrammetry? So I think maybe I miscommunicated. We are using a bit of both. All the stuff I showed you, which is photogrammetry, I mean, some of the stuff we're not using because it's stuff from temples and private property, so to speak, and we don't want to put it in a commercial game, so we're not using it. But we are doing a lot of photogrammetry, which we are using. But there is a pipeline difference. There's a different pipeline of different people altogether who have to do both, and it's a little more complex, I would say, on the photogrammetry side to take it all the way into the game engine to put it in a game confidently. I think there's a different kind of a hard journey, basically. I don't think it's more complex. See, at the end of the day, a sculptor who looks at not at production concept art. So we don't work with production concept art. I work with my sculptors where I work with ideas and let them express what they want to do, which is different maybe from the sort of straightforward model. So when you do that, even when you don't do that, it is doing injustice to a 3D artist to feel like photogrammetry is harder or this is harder or that is harder. They're both very different, and we shouldn't be comparing because what a sculptor does is insane at the end of the day. And I think 3D sculpting and 3D art is I've realized it's so underappreciated in this country especially that it shocks me. And so while I do have access to photogrammetry right now, my conscious choice is to actually continue working with the 3D artists because I believe that's an important skill and it reflects the craft tradition of this country. And we should aspire to use both things together, but not as a replacement for each other. I think that's how I approach it. Yeah. Yeah, anyone can, yeah, you can go. Sorry, I'm taking all the front people.
Can you mind telling me how you got the support from different organizations you mentioned on the starting, right?
Only 3. How I got support? Well, Epic Mega Grants, I was totally broke one night and trying to make this game. And one night at 1:30 in the night, I still remember, I just went on the Epic website because a long time I was delaying asking the Mega Grants, thinking I got to make this perfect proposal and la 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 la. I got so desperate and broke that I just wrote to Epic Mega Grant that night. Somehow, it went to the right ears, and Epic Mega Grant got back in touch with me. Quentin, I don't think he's here. Big shout out to him from Epic for noticing me. That's Epic and Epic Mega Grant, which is just an application. I didn't know anybody at Epic. I just, like everybody here can do that. The other ones, similar. They put out, the British Council had a kind of a program for a grant program. It required an application form. So apply. The New Ink, the incubator in New York, they had an application form. Apply. You got to be desperate, man. That's it. Connections are not required. I didn't have any connection in these places. But you need to have desperation, if not connection, I think. I was desperate. I'm still desperate for funding. You got to be desperate. Yeah.
Just to be conscious of time.
Yes.
Avinash is
I'm available. Yeah, sure.
still here. So I think you're there
I'm here all day. Yeah.
today,
Tomorrow, half day, yes.
after. So he's here for 36 hours.
Yes. Also, I'm right here.
Right there.
Just please email me if you want or follow us on Instagram, send me a message. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome.
Thank you.